Oh, it's on bright space. That's right. I'm not going to do this every single day, but I'm just trying to save a little time passing that sheet around. So just mark your name if you're here. And so I can get started. All right. So a lot of you have got the assignment turned in already. Some of you have not. It's due tonight. So if you have not already done so, please do. And that's really all I needed was the, so good. So today I want to talk a little bit more about what needs to be or should be in a report. Because it is one of the things that new officers struggle with the most, because on the one hand, you have a lot of pressure put on you to make good use of your time. if you're backed up on calls and things like that, your supervisor does not want you spending like a whole shift in the office trying to catch up on reports. And so you kind of have that pressure to get it done and get it done quickly, combined with also the pressure to not look like an idiot in court later on because you didn't get enough information in your report, or to have your boss get on you because you're missing important information in your report. So there is a little bit of a balance there that you have to find. Fortunately, with repetition, doing it over and over again, you will get more comfortable with it, and the format will start to kind of speed things along too. If you do things kind of in the same order all the time, like every single report that I've ever written in my entire life has started with on this date and this time, and it kind of proceeds from there. And so you start at the beginning and tell the story about what happened. So somebody sent me an interesting video that showed some cops using too much force on a person. And so we'll kind of start with that.
Video shared widely online, raising questions once again about police use of force. 3 law enforcement officers of Arkansas have been removed from duty after bystander video captured 2 of them beating a suspect during an arrest, while the third holds him down. Police said the officers were responding to threats made at a convenience store in Mulberry, about 140 miles northwest of Little Rock. Authorities have not suggested that the suspect was armed.
I think this one might be the better one.
A viral video is being seen by millions across the country. Like that tape shows Arkansas police beating a man while he's on the ground. That man is 27-year-old Randall Worcester of Goose Creek. And we want to warn you, this footage is extremely graphic and disturbing. Here's making the piece.
What's that guy doing? Punching him where? And where's his head when it's been being punched? Yeah. That's deadly force, people. Like that is likely to cause serious physical injury or death if you do that. I mean, at the very least, you're giving the guy a concussion, and you can cause permanent brain damage that way. According to the news people, what this guy did, I forget what they were arresting him for, but they were arresting him for something, and when they put hands on him, he fought back, and he ended up punching one of the deputies, I think, in the back of the head or something like that, and that's kind of got them all kind of dogpiled on top of him, and he's still struggling. And this guy, throughout the entire encounter, as far as I've noticed, seems to just be holding him down, which nothing wrong with that. This guy, though, is like throughout the whole thing just targeting the head, and later on he picks his head up and slams it back down a couple of times, I think. So way too bad. That guy needs to be charged. This guy is doing some knee strikes to the side of his leg, which is pretty common police training tactics. The only thing that I would say with that is when you've done that about 3 times or so and you're not getting the desired result, time to do something else. And at some point later on in the encounter, he comes around here and it looks like he does another knee strike, like in the middle of his back, which would be targeting the spine, which is also a bad thing. So I normally don't start out with a video like this because there's a lot to unpack in this video, but could you imagine trying to write the report on this? Because in your report, especially a use of force report, part of the purpose of that is also justifying your actions, right? So you have to show, communicate things that aren't necessarily clear in the video. For example, would it make a difference in what they're doing here if it was later revealed that the guy had a gun? Like underneath of him and his hand was on the gun. I mean, it's okay. I mean, it's a discussion. I'm not trying to tell you the right answer or not. I see some people shaking their head yes and some people shaking their head no. And the truth is, even in that situation, it kind of depends, you know, but it would definitely come a lot closer because I just told you, targeting the head, especially when the head is in contact with the ground, that's a deadly force move, which means that in order for that to be justified, you'd have to be facing an imminent risk of death. So if you wouldn't be justified in doing that if you think he might have a gun, or even if you know that he does, if it's not like immediately ready for him to do something. Like if you've got both of his hands controlled and you know there's a gun in his waistband, you can't be doing that stuff, you know. But if his hand's on it and then he's trying to pull it out, yeah, probably. And that's where this kind of stuff gets kind of there's a lot of gray areas in this. So but if you want to know later on if this guy gets charged criminally in court or if somebody sues over it or whatever, the standard for police officers in whether their force is justified is actually in one of those cases that you signed up for. If anybody signed up for Graham v. Connor, that's what that case is about. It's about a cop that mistook a diabetic episode for a person being drunk, you know, and basically delayed him, you know, detained him for a period of time, which kind of made his episode a little bit worse. And so the standard on which we judge police officers is the facts known to them at the time. And if it's a deadly force situation, there has to be an imminent risk of death. So can you shoot somebody in the back while they're running away is another thing that people tend to shake their head no on. But the real answer is maybe. If he has a gun in his hand and he's starting to raise it back towards you, yeah, his back can be facing towards you and he can still shoot you. You know, he won't be as accurate, but all it takes is one lucky shot. So I wanted to kind of start with this mainly just because it was just forwarded to me at the end of last week, and I thought I need to play this in class. So and also writing the report kind of depends also on which of these three individuals that you are, because this guy's just trying to hold him down. He didn't really do anything wrong, but now he's lumped in with these other two, especially this guy that's doing all this, you know, bad stuff. And you know, but really, what's he gonna do about it? Yeah.
The accuracy is important in those reports, but what happens if authors of them writing the report are inaccurate? What happens?
Well, you say, what if it does happen? You know, it's hopefully happening with less frequency now that we have more, you know, transparency and accountability, because just like bad guys, sometimes, you know, cops consider what they think they can get away with. You know, there is a self-preservation instinct, right? And so if this wasn't on video and it turns out that this guy didn't suffer as severe of injuries as he might have, like if he ends up not brain damaged, if he ends up kind of coming out of it, there, you know, back in the day, especially, it would have been kind of a play stupid games, win stupid prizes kind of thing, right? You know, you fight the cops, you're going to get your head bashed or whatever, you know, kind of thing. We're obviously moving towards less tolerance on that kind of thing. But really, it comes down to we try to put systems in place and things in place so that they're less tempted to do that. That's what the push in the last, you know, 5, 6, 7 years for everybody everywhere to have cameras on them at all times. That's really what this is about, is trying to stop things like this from going on, because it's not new. Has anybody heard of Rodney King? Right, that was the first viral video. Yeah, that was in the early nineties, you know, and it wasn't like somebody with a cell phone camera. It was a news crew that happened to be down in wherever it was, Compton or wherever it was in LA. And they were filming like a live kind of a thing for something else, something completely unrelated. And this police chase just happened to end right there. And so they recorded it. And when the cops caught up with this guy that was running away with them, they brought a beat down with them, and it was just nonstop kicking, batons, all that stuff. The only reason he wasn't more seriously injured is because at that time cops had really bad training on batons, and they were like not really hitting in full force, not on purpose, but just because they weren't trained on how to deliver the most effective strike. But if they decide, you know, to get together and try to say that the guy had a gun, you know, or the guy had a knife or something like that, can they get away with that? You know, it's hopefully less likely now than ever before, and it hopefully will dissuade them from trying to do that. But human beings are human beings, and sometimes they do stuff like that, even when they're supposed to be the good guys. Another thing I'll say about that is there was an incident here in Marshall a few years ago where cops got caught doing that. They claimed that that they had a guy get away from them when they were trying to arrest him. And one of the cops fired a shot at him at his car as he's driving away. Presumably, in order to kind of cover up that incompetence, he made up a story that said that this guy pointed a gun at him. Pulled the trigger and the weapon malfunctioned, and that's why he fired the shot. And then when they were preparing for trial, the prosecutor reviewed the video from the Walmart parking lot, and it showed that he was not telling the truth. He wasn't where he claimed to be when this happened and all that kind of stuff. And those guys got fired. The prosecutor actually published a press release that stated that he'll never file charges that any of those guys bring in the future if they get on with some other department in the county or anything like that. They basically impeached themselves as a credible witness, which means they can't work as a police officer, because police officers, everything we do ends up in court, right? So if you can't believe me when I testify, then I can't bring a case against anybody, even if it's caught on video and all that kind of stuff. So the stakes are pretty high, you know, in that regard, but we always kind of have to fight against that temptation that may be there for cops to not tell the truth. And that's why we try to do accountability like that. Each of these three guys will have had to write a report. According to the news article here, the FBI is actually doing a civil rights investigation in addition to whatever internal investigation may happen. This is somewhere in Arkansas. I think it's a pretty rural area of Arkansas. And I don't know anything more than that really, except that it's just plain obvious by looking at it that this is unjustified. Well, we'll just say excessive, because they were justified in fighting the guy because, you know, they were effecting an arrest. Yeah.
It's because similar to the last case of George Floyd.
It's not exactly the same.
No, the motivation is not.
Yeah. The issue with George Floyd really is that he went unconscious and they failed to stop, you know, when he was completely unconscious. And but they were up to the point that he passed out. They were pretty justified in what they were doing. You know, the contrary to popular belief, you know, he died from positional asphyxia combined, you know, kind of exacerbated by poor health. But this is just plain deadly force. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just clearly excessive, you know. there's no justification. I think if they had the justification, they would have said it by now. You know, because they're getting a lot of bad press now, but, you know, this is how you would fight somebody that's trying to kill you. You know, and as far as I can tell, this guy isn't trying to kill them, he's trying to get away from them. And there is a difference there, a big difference. And so normally in the report, if you're like targeting the head or the neck or the spine or something like that, you would have to have something in your report that justifies that. These guys aren't going to have that, you know. There's no reasonable fear for their safety or anything like that, or deadly, against deadly force. So, the best that they can do is just write down what they did and just kind of accept the consequences of it. Especially since there's a clear video of it. And I'm not sure if they had body cameras. They definitely haven't released them. But most everybody does nowadays, so I'd find it hard to believe that they didn't. So, any more questions or comments about that? When I play stuff like this in class, the point is I want to kind of get you guys talking about it, thinking about it. There's no right and wrong, as far as I'm not going to try to cram my opinion down your throat about whether or not certain things are so or not. So if you have a different take on it, feel free to speak your mind. The issue too with some of these situations is that it's really comes down to, could there possibly be something going on here that isn't obvious in the video that would justify it? Like I said about maybe he had a knife, maybe he had a gun, maybe he's already stabbed somebody, something like that, I don't know necessarily, because again, it really depends. At the moment when he used that force, was it because he saw that the guy was about to get the knife out, kind of thing? And then that kind of thing. So sometimes these things are really specific like that. Or maybe you had justification for it 5 minutes ago, but now you don't. Like with George Floyd, they were justified in fighting him. He was fighting with very vigorously fighting him. He was a big guy. And so they had to use a lot of their energy to fight him down. And so their hesitancy to stop when he stopped is understandable, but still, not for that long. You might be hesitant for 30 seconds or a minute or something like that. Like, is this really over kind of thing? But, when he's clearly unconscious, they checked for a pulse and couldn't find one. And that guy wouldn't get off. And it's like, no, you shove him off and you make this happen. So that was another unjustified force, but it was a little different than this one. This one's just clearly this guy just kind of in a rage going down. What was that?
Like this guy was hitting him, this guy was holding him, wasn't he just kind of holding him down, let the guy do it?
Yeah, that's a thing. But at the same time, you also have to understand too that he is focused on what he's doing. He's not necessarily completely, I don't have to say he's unaware. It's pretty, it's pretty obvious. You had to have noticed, at some point. And there's no audio on this, so you don't know that he didn't say, what the fuck are you doing? Sorry for my language, but something like that. But if he, what's he gonna do? Let go of the guy and let him, let him get the upper hand, because that could turn into a sideways situation in a hurry. To some extent, he's kind of just, that's why I feel sorry for that guy. Most in this scenario is because what could he have done? Yeah, he could have gotten up off the guy, but then, he gets up off the guy and then the guy starts beating the ever loving crap out of the other two. And now it's like, what the hell did you get up? Kind of thing. So, at some point though, somebody had an obligation to do something, didn't they? And then that's the thing, like with the George Floyd situation. And that's why, to tell you the truth, I really don't know how that went. They were trying to charge the other 2 or 3 that were involved in that as an accessory, you know, because they didn't stop him. And I don't know, because the Chauvin trial was last summer, so I don't know. I'll have to look that up and find out, you know, how that's gone. I mean, they certainly got fired. But yeah, there is an obligation to intervene when your own team goes overboard. And but it's easier said than done, I will say, especially like in the Chauvin case, he was a senior guy there. He had like 20 years on. And like one of those guys, it was his first day of FTO. Like you do what you're told at that point, right? You know, you don't speak up, you don't stop anybody from doing anything, you don't even know how it's done, you know, kind of thing. So, you know, there is, you know, it's not as black and white as what we would like it to be. But I will say that guy went so excessive with it, especially when he started picking up the head and bashing it and stuff, is that, yeah, somebody should have done something.
Throughout
You
that
know.
whole entire video, did they just keep going or did they stop?
The whole thing is, I mean, that we don't have the actual footage from start to finish of the whole thing. It's snippets of it that are included in media coverage. They haven't released the official body camera or anything like that. But it appears the situation only lasted 2 or 3 minutes, really. You know, it's just that during that 2 or 3 minutes, that one guy in particular was just all over targeting the head, you know, which I don't know how much training they get in Arkansas or whatever at their police agencies or whatever, but if he's had any defensive tactics ever, you know, he knows that the head is a red area. It's an area that you only target if it's very, very justified. And I didn't see anything in that video that would justify it. But again, there could be things I don't know, but I don't think so. This seems to me like a guy that just lost it. You know, the cop just got really mad about having to fight this guy, and just kind of a similar thing to Chauvin, really. That's why he sat there all defiantly on top of him while this guy was dying, you know, instead of like getting him in a recovery position and trying to get him breathing again and that kind of stuff. It was because he was just like, F this guy kind of thing, you know, like forget this guy. I'm not moving. You know, if I get off him, he's just going to start fighting again. And it's like, no, you can't be that way. When they're unresponsive, you gotta check on their well-being. You're responsible for everybody in your custody, even if they're being a jerk, even if they're kind of dangerous. You know, you have to, you know, tend to them, you know, once the fight is over. So, but that's a good point. We have a duty to intervene, even when the one that's going too far is one of our own. It's just during the midst of a fight like that, it kind of goes against everything that we think we should be doing, because, you know, if we let go of this person that we're trying to control, we are potentially giving them the ability to get the upper hand in a situation that we had to fight very vigorously to get the upper hand. And it can go sideways. What if he is? We don't know. They didn't pat him down. He could have been armed and they didn't know it, you know, and if he lets him up and he shoots the other guy, you know, what's going to happen there, you know? So, I mean, everything we do has a potential side effect. And so it probably does have to rise to a pretty high degree before you're going to get a cop willing to do that, you know, but this situation probably did rise to that degree, because I wouldn't have tolerated seeing that head strike more than once. You know, like first time I'd have been like, stop, you know, and the second time I'd have been trying to figure something out, get myself over there or something so I can block the head and still hold him down, maybe something, you know. I mean, it's bad. That guy's probably going to jail. But then again, it's Arkansas, so I don't know. You know, if it happened in New York or LA, he'd definitely be already in cuffs. I don't know.
So I'm from Arkansas. And
I wasn't trying to bash
No,
Arkansas.
you're
I
fine.
just said the same
No,
thing if
no,
it was
I get it,
Missouri,
yeah.
by the way.
Little Rock
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
from Arkansas. And
Yeah.
it's just probably the worst area in Arkansas. There's cases like that happens on like everyday basis down in Little Rock. So I'm really.
I was just saying around here in the Midwest, we tend to be more siding with law enforcement when there's any gray areas. And that's kind of what I meant by that, was that, you know, there may not be as much accountability as we would like there to be for that. It also depends on whether he actually ends up with long lasting injuries from it. If he ends up having traumatic brain injury and all of that kind of stuff, it's going to force more accountability.
They don't wear body cams. That's not a thing.
Yeah, I really think it's going to start being a thing everywhere. Like, I'm.
Some of them work in Chevron, but they do, but that's not. Like they have.
Well, let me talk about that briefly a little bit here, kind of what the issues are surrounding that. Because I was a cop before body cameras. I mean, I won't say before body cameras existed, they existed, but it didn't really become a big push for it until 2015, 16, 17. I didn't work for an agency that provided body cameras until 2017. And I only worked there for a year after that before I quit to come here. So I spent most of my career without a body camera on. They did exist, but they were more like GoPros, you know, like it was just something that didn't really come with software. You had the choice on using it or not using it. They would give it, my agency anyway, that I started out with, they bought like, I think 5 of them or something like that. And they were kind of test piloting it. So they gave it to some of the patrol supervisors or whatever to kind of play around with. But it was just something where you record or you don't record, and then you take it to your desk and you plug it in the thumb drive or whatever, and you download it. But there was nothing to prevent anybody from deleting videos. There was nothing to prevent, you know, anybody from editing or otherwise messing with the videos and stuff like that. Well, you can't really, you gotta follow a lot of rules whenever you're submitting evidence in court. And one of those rules is that it hasn't been tampered with. It is what it claims to be, you know, there's, you know, and stuff like that. So there's a lot of expense that comes along with not just buying the equipment, but you have to be able to store the video. You have to have a very sophisticated software that's hack proof, that, you know, that the cops don't have a choice. You know, everything that gets recorded gets downloaded without them having to necessarily have any involvement in it now. So now body cameras are, when you get back, you know, in an area where you have it, you know, it downloads wirelessly or whatever to the server, and it's stored there, and it's there for a certain length of time regardless. And then if it's part of a case, it gets flagged as part of that case, and then it stays in there forever. And you have access to it, the prosecutor has access to it. You know, they can make copies of it for the defense attorneys and stuff like that. And you have video on like every single case because you're present at every single case. And so, you know, and you have policy that says you will turn it on, but every policy has to have some kind of a caveat in that for malfunctions or technology issues or something like that. What if you come in and your body camera doesn't work? Or what if you're out on patrol and it dies, the battery dies because it's just hot, you know? I mean, stuff like that does happen. Now, the fact that you're outfitting every single officer means that most likely in a scenario where you're doing something, hopefully you've got at least one other officer there. So if yours malfunctions, theirs wouldn't, or it gets knocked off. You know, that's what happened. There was a situation in Atlanta where a guy got shot on a DWI stop. And, you know, it turned into a big thing. But the officer's body camera got knocked off early in the fight, so you don't see the shooting on video. So, you know, stuff like that. But mostly the reason the rule agencies struggle a lot with it, in the past especially, is because it's just so damn expensive. You know, like, you know, these guys have trouble affording to buy ammo so that they can qualify once a year, you know, like the department, much less that.
That's the state trooper.
Yeah.
And this summer he just had got
Which state?
Missouri.
They just now got, really? Cause they aren't poor.
Yeah.
Troopers are rich enough, the troopers are rich enough as an agency that they actually have a whole division designated to lobbying Congress. Like, they have like a dozen or so troopers that's their job, is to lobby Congress for for the agency. Legislative liaison is what they call it.
Yeah, but before they had like microphones.
Yeah.
They would put it like.
Yeah, the car cameras, yeah.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize that troopers didn't. I knew they were slow to adopt tasers, mainly just
Yeah, you
because,
got 'em last year.
mainly just because most of the time troopers are fighting people like in their car at close range, and tasers suck for that. But yeah, they were slow to adopt that. I didn't have it at Capitol Police either, a taser. But every sheriff's department I've worked for, yeah, I guess both sheriff's departments I worked for, it makes me sound like it bounced around a lot. But I had tasers at both of those all the time, but yeah, the body cameras are expensive, and then you have to have, you know, the residual cost of the software and the space on a server to store all those videos and stuff like that. And that's why it's been slow to be adopted by rural agencies, is because the only way they can ever afford that is grants. And grants are a pain in the ass, you know, like you have to kind of jump through a lot of hoops and fill out the right paperwork at the right time. Like bigger agencies have people that's their job, is to get grants for the department. With smaller agencies, you know, unless they have a really good like assistant chief or something, you know, that can do that kind of stuff. They often miss out on the grants because they don't, you know, the guy that does their applications for grants also like runs the department and does a bunch of other stuff, you know, so I feel for the agencies like that, but at the same time, we are fast approaching, if we're not already there, at a time when it's just plain dangerous for agencies not to have body cameras, because if we can't prove that something happened or didn't happen, you know, that's what the public clamors for, is body cameras, body cameras, body cameras. And if you can't provide that, you know, then they kind of default to something is wrong and you're trying to cover it up. We had a shooting in Sedalia, a young lady who was stopped by a sheriff's deputy, and according to the deputy, she got rather irate on the traffic stop, threatened to kill him, and then like reached down like she was going to retrieve a weapon, and he shot her dead. And turns out there was no weapon in the car. And so there ended up, it was near enough to a business that the business had a camera that showed that way. But it was only video, and all it showed is that he's like there and kind of clearly having some kind of a disagreement with the lady, and then, you know, like, you know, shoots her. So it was inconclusive, would you say it that way? It didn't prove that she threatened to kill him. It didn't prove that she didn't. So there's a cloud of suspicion, right? There's people, especially her family and friends. There was protests and everything else about it a couple of years ago. Her name, Ann Pfizer. And, you know, the officer was cleared, you know, as far as he wasn't charged with anything. But again, it was more of a, you can't prove it one way or another thing than it was that we know you did the right thing. But it cost the sheriff re-election. You know, the sheriff that had just completed his 4th consecutive term as sheriff was lost the election, you know, a few months later because of this, because he had to go on TV and explain why his agency had no body cameras and no car cameras. This was a traffic stop, and there wasn't even car cameras, you know, and we've had car cameras since the 80s, you know, like there's no excuse not to have a camera in the car. It's not that expensive. It's not as bad as body cameras. So, you know, he came on TV and said, oh, well, you know, we have budget issues and something. And so then the county commission, you know, had to defend themselves, and they're like, you haven't asked for body cameras lately. And, you know, it was a whole thing. So that's what I'm saying about, all it takes is one incident like that and you're screwed. as, you know, as far as, you know, there's people that will forever think that that guy, that cop got away with murder. The incoming sheriff fired him. Not for cause, but when a new sheriff takes over, he has pretty much absolute authority over who he commissions. He doesn't have to have a reason, you know, and so he did it because it was politically expedient, because that's how he got elected, was that he was gonna reform the department. So he told the guy that, you know, he wasn't gonna have a job in January, you know, when he won the election in November. And but if we'd have had a body camera, right, it might have proven that this guy actually did the right thing. Those things are very nuanced. It really depends. Can you shoot somebody that doesn't have a gun? I don't know. If I did this to you, what do you think's about to happen? You know, like, so, you know, so that's why I think that we are at a point now where if you're working for an agency that doesn't have body cameras, find another job, like for real, or buy your own something. At least it'd be better than nothing. I don't know. I wouldn't work patrol without a body camera ever again. Now, because I don't want to be that guy. You know, it's, you know, the Michael Brown shooting, same way. You know, that when they actually did prove it was a justified shooting, and there's still people that think that it wasn't. You know, because we don't have the video to show just how threatening and dangerous, you know, the situation was. So that being said, it's I've exhausted all my time now, so don't forget about that assignment. And it's just the link to the Library of Congress thing. If you weren't here last time and you need to pick a topic, come see me real quick and we'll get that sorted out. Yeah. Yeah, it's a full transcript. Yeah. Thank you. Hey, hang on a second. Hey, can I see that again? Just want to double check that it's the actual Supreme Court one and not.
Oh my gosh, Jackie, she's my sweet mate. Started taking a shower at 9:30. No, 8:30. Didn't get out until 9:51. I'm like, huh? I'm about to have to text her and be like, okay.
Usually it has more than one page. That's what caught my eye. Right as you walked away, I saw it said one page and like a page.
I need to.
I can help you on that in just a minute. What's up? Oh, I need the roll thing too, wherever that is. Yeah, yeah. If you didn't sign in, do so. Sorry. Oh, right. Now let me look. Yeah, just give me a sec. What's your last name? Oh, I passed it.
Cause there's two things,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't know which one.
So what this is. Looks right. Yeah. It's got the volume number and case number and page number. Yeah, this is. Good.
Thank you.
Yep. Whatever. Not the 11 o'clock. 11 o'clock. All right. Yeah, it's sideways.
Oh my God.
Yeah, can you see on there? What's up? Yeah, yeah, don't worry about due dates on the like not the quiz, not the chapter quizzes, but the ones that say like, chapters 1 through 4 or whatever. I want to make sure we covered that before. we take it. Yeah, I probably should have, held off on the start date on those, you know, but, Yeah, I guess I should say, I wouldn't recommend taking the exams online until I say so in class, like, hey, probably take the exam now. Yeah, because I want to be pretty close to covering the whole thing before anybody takes a stab at it. At this point, you'd be doing it blind.
Oh, so
You
you
know?
will say
Yeah.
that.
I will. Now, the individual chapter quizzes, you can take those anytime you want because they don't really count for anything.
Like the. This one, yeah, like.
Yeah,
the
Ramsey.
assignment, yeah, the assignment, I choose the.
Yep, that's it. That's right.
This is the right one, and I have to copy that one, right?
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay.
And copy and paste that into a doc and then.
Yeah,
upload it.
thank you so much.
Yep.
It should be right, what I choose, what's this?
Yeah, pull it up real quick.
Choose these, right?
It looks like it. Pull it up.
Here, and so.
Just pull it up on your thing so I can see it, like the actual, where the link goes. Like that. Yeah, click on it. And the PDF. Here, yeah, where it says go. Yeah, that's the right one, and so you'll just copy and paste the link. That's the
This will work as a, or have to
No, you gotta get it from Library of Congress. If you, are you having trouble finding it?
do another one, yeah. I already have a.
Oh, no, I mean, it's your call for the amendment one, you don't wanna search the case name, you wanna search whatever the amendment is. I wasn't really expecting you guys necessarily to put that in there yet,
Oh, okay.
because I didn't want to confuse people. Because in order for you to know which amendment applies, you'd have to read the case, and I didn't want them to really, start writing. I was afraid, that's what happened last year, is they started writing the damn thing. Which amendment is yours about? So just search Fourth Amendment, and one of the top results should be constitution.congress.gov. That's the one you want, for sure. Yeah. And, it's just full text of it,
I have seen that we have actually, but it's not put together, right?
No, don't do any quizzes yet, unless you want to take the individual chapter quizzes, but, yeah, don't worry about the quiz or the exam, sorry. It's 89 pages, isn't it? Damn. Yeah, that's right.
Thank you.
Before you freak out, you won't have to read the whole 89 pages to do the assignment. I gotta get out of this recording too.